Hey everyone, welcome to the July update on the performance of my solar array. This month's video is going to be slightly longer as I've got some more exciting information to share with you, and I'm responding to a few requests from some of our other viewers. So first of all, the most exciting thing to mention is the new Give Energy 9.5 kilowatt battery is it's installed, and it's up and running. If I move on to the disclaimer, it's the usual thing. Everything I'm sharing is my own opinion, and I'm sharing it for informational and educational purposes. Please pause the video and read it properly, but make sure you get professional advice if you're considering any of these things. Thank you to those of you who've been using the Octopus Energy referral link. For those of you who are interested in switching, you can use the URL that you see there on the screen, which will take you to their website, and apply the £50 discount to both your new account and my account as a thank you from Octopus. If their website is not allowing you to do the switch online, you can give Octopus a phone call, and if you quote the account number that you see there on the screen, they will then also be able to apply the £50 discount to both your account and my account. One thing I would suggest to you is, even if you're in the middle of a contract right now, with the price rises that we're expecting to see here in the UK in October, it might be worth incurring the penalty to leave your existing provider and switch to Octopus, perhaps, if they're working out more cost effective for you. So you could consider the £50 thank you, offsetting any kind of penalty you may incur. With the price rises coming up, it might be worth switching now before those price rises really kick in, and secure yourself onto a 12-month deal at a sensible price. Okay, so something to really think about there, and you can take advantage of the £50 discount. If you're interested in switching to Enphase, drop me an email. You can find my email address on the About page of my YouTube channel. Drop me an email with those details that I need there, and I will refer you across to Enphase, and then we'll get £100 each as a thank you from them if you go through with your order. Alright, so the additional parts in this video is, because of the new battery, I'm going to recap on the equipment in my system, and I'm also going to show you a schematic of how all the electrics are laid out. If you're not interested in this bit, fast forward to the next chapter, and you can get on with looking at the analysis that you're used to seeing. So for those of you who are interested in the recap, these are all the different bits and pieces in my system. So I have solar panels manufactured by Trina on my roof. It's the Vertex S 385 watt panels. I have 19 of them, 10 on the front of my house and 9 on the back. I have an Enphase microinverter system, so I have 19 Enphase IQ7 Plus microinverters, one behind every single panel, and I also have the Enphase Envoy communications gateway inside my house. All of the inverters communicate with the gateway, and the gateway submits the data to the cloud, and then I can see all the analysis in the app or on their web portal. For my battery storage, I have a Give Energy system. So first of all, I have the Give Energy AC 3.0. So this is the inverter which converts energy from the grid or from the panels from AC back to DC. And then I now have two batteries in my setup. I have the existing 8.2 battery that I've had for about 9 months now, and I've just added on a 9.5 kilowatt battery. So in total, I have just under 18 kilowatts of storage available through Give Energy. For the car, I've got two Hypervolt home chargers installed. We have the Audi Q4, which is fully electric, and we also have a My Energy Eddy in our array, which is diverting surplus solar to warm up our hot water, which saves us a little bit of money on paying for gas. And then finally, to take advantage of cheap electricity and to take advantage of, at the time I switched, the best export rate for electricity, we have got Octopus Energy as our gas and electric provider. So this is all the different components of my kind of system in terms of going green and trying to save some money burnt on energy. If I move forward to talk about our electrical setup, what I've done here is drawn a schematic of the components involved in our solar system, our battery storage, car charging, Eddy, etc. I've excluded the majority of components you find normally in a house, like microwave, fridge, lighting circuit, etc., etc. So the slide here is in two halves. The left-hand half represents incoming electricity, and the right-hand half shows you where the electricity is being stored or consumed. So bear with me as I try and explain this. So first of all, if you follow my mouse on the screen, if we start over here, what you're used to seeing is incoming electricity from the grid. So I've got my grid supply, I've got a 100 amp cutout fuse, it then goes through my SMETS2 smart meter, and then after the smart meter on the live tails, what I have is all the different grid CT clamps. So the car chargers, the hypervolts, have one each on that tail, the My Energy system has one each there, and the Give Energy system has one CT clamp. Okay, so we've got 4 CT clamps around the live tail there. It then continues on into a Henley block. So I've got multiple consumer units in my system, and so what we need is a Henley block which splits the incoming single supply into numerous outputs. So you can have more than 2, but we only need 2. The reason I've got 2 consumer units is our main consumer unit has only got 14 fuses and 13 of them are in use. Now, the consumer unit was only replaced 1 or 2 years ago, so I don't want to spend the money again for a rewire to replace it with a bigger one. And also the brand that we've got, Contactum, they don't make a bigger consumer unit with like 18 or 20 ways. So what we had to do is get a second consumer unit to put alongside it. So that's why we have a Henley block. We've got this 14-way Contactum, and then I've got a 6-way Contactum block, 6-way Contactum consumer unit over here. All right. I actually then have another consumer unit as a sub main off this one, which powers a portion of our house. But we don't need to get into that, but this is kind of how it all hangs together. So this is how incoming power gets from the grid into our 2 main consumer units, which are driving everything around the house. Now, if I move up to the top left portion of the screen, let's talk about the incoming electricity from our solar panels. So I've got 2 kind of strings, the front array and the back array of the house. In total, I've got 19 solar panels, and I have 19 Enphase IQ7 Plus inverters, one behind every panel. So the 2 strings come along, they go in a junction box, joining them together, and then this goes into an isolator switch. After the isolator switch, we have 3 different CT clamps measuring the production of our solar panels. So we've got one from Enphase, one from Give Energy, and one from My Energy, all plugged in on the wire over there. After that, the wire goes off into the Enphase Envoy communications gateway, and from there the wire goes off down to our consumer unit. And from here, the energy that's coming from the solar panels is consumed by all the other devices connected to this consumer unit, but it actually can travel back through the Henley block and power all the devices which are in our main consumer unit as well. Okay, this kind of works seamlessly through the Henley block. Alright, if I talk about the top right hand portion now, which is all relating to the battery system. First of all, we have a Give Energy EMS115 meter. It's like a digital meter, and it takes up one of the fuse slots in your consumer unit. So that's plugged into this consumer unit over here. The cable then comes back up and goes to our loft, and I have a CT clamp on the wire over here from My Energy, which measures the battery consumption or output. I then have it going into an isolator. The isolator then goes into a meter, which I never use. It's not smart, so you have to go and physically read the screen, but I've got no reason to do this. The wire then goes into the AC 3.0 Give Energy inverter. From there, the new cable comes out and goes into the 9.5 kilowatt battery. Now the 9.5 has got a built-in 100 amp fuse. So previously I had a separate unit here in between the AC inverter and the 8.2 battery with a 100 amp fuse. Now that's been removed and the cable goes direct to the 9.5 with the fuse built in. And then from the other output from the 9.5 comes a cable going into the 8.2, daisy chaining that battery together. So this is how the AC inverter and the Give Energy batteries are connected up. If I go back down to the sub-main consumer unit then, we have 2 hypervolt EV chargers. So we have two separate fuses, two separate cables coming out, one each. And then the car is charged from whichever one I want to. Finally, if I go to the very bottom of the screen, let's talk about the My Energy products. So my Eddy is located upstairs and my incoming supply is under the stairs. It's not possible for me to run a cable between the two for a CT clamp, so I had to get the Harvey. So the My Energy CT clamp, which is measuring my grid import-export, goes into a Harvey, and the Harvey wirelessly communicates that data to my hub and to my Eddy. Okay, so from the house, I've separated out that I have got a wireless internet router like everybody else, and the My Energy hub is connected into that. And then separately, we have got the circuit which goes off to the immersion heaters. So we've got a fuse first of all, then we've got the Eddy. The Eddy's got two outputs. I have a fuse on each of those, and then it goes into an immersion heater. Now in our house we have two separate water tanks. Each of them have got one immersion heater each, and that's why I've drawn it like this. The Eddy doesn't really care whether you've got two tanks, two immersion heaters, a radiator, underfloor heating. All it sees is two outputs, period. And then you can connect it up however you want. So if you've got two immersion heaters in the same tank, you could wire up in the same way, just to two different immersion heaters in the same tank. You can have one going to underfloor heating and another one to the immersion heater. All sorts of combinations like that. There's plenty of options if you read the Eddy instructions. But this is how my setup is done. Okay, so I'm getting wireless communication from here to here to here. And what I haven't actually drawn on the slide, because it'll make it look messy, is this CT clamp up here, measuring the battery, is actually hardwired to my Eddy. Okay, the Eddy is located roughly directly under the battery, so I've been able to make a small hole in the corner of the ceiling and push the wire through, and you can't see it. So this CT clamp is hardwired. If I wasn't able to hardwire it, then I would need to put another Harvey over here to wirelessly transmit that data. As far as I understand, you can have multiple Harveys in your system. But this is a schematic of all the bits which relate to the solar array, so I hope you found this diagram helpful. So here we are with July's data. If I do the usual, start from the left-hand side. So our solar array produced 893 kilowatts. We exported 51 kilowatts to the grid. We imported 54.7 kilowatts from the grid, meaning our house consumed a total of 897.2 kilowatts. If you look at the chart here, July was a pretty good month. On average, we seem to produce about 25 kilowatts across the month. You can see that we have very little draw from the grid in these months here. We do have a little bit of output every day because we have an excess, and I'm starting to get better at consuming our excess and kind of managing when to turn on different things. So compared to prior months, you're seeing less and less export to the grid. You do see a few anomalies. So you see this day over here where we've had to import from the grid despite producing something like 35 kilowatts. In addition, you can see these days over here where it's absolutely gone crazy. The reason for that is this is when we had the battery installed, so the whole system switched off for a while. Okay, over here on this day, we had some electrical work happening in the house, so we had turned off the array and the battery temporarily so we don't get electrocuted, and then we forgot to turn everything back on for a few hours. So we have a little bit of import coming in there which we wouldn't have otherwise needed. As we got to kind of the 26th, 27th of July, it got a bit overcast, so we weren't producing that much. The battery started to run low, and even though we were capturing some excess into the battery, it wasn't enough to make it through. And then, of course, we had, on the 27th, we had the battery installed, so the entire array, all the solar panels and the battery were switched off. So in reality, I think we probably would have produced about 900 kilowatts in total if everything was switched on and monitoring. And of course, we wouldn't have pulled these units here from the grid. We would have used the power that was in the battery already to service the house. So the data for a few days here has gone haywire. On this day, the 28th, the battery went into calibration mode once it was commissioned. So Give Energy do a full discharge, and then they do a full charge. I can't schedule when the charge is. I did ask them, to take advantage of the cheap Octopus Go rate. So basically the battery was doing a full charge of the 18 kilowatts or whatever it is during peak time. So although we've produced quite a lot of solar power on this day, we're also pulling from the grid because it's charging up the battery at full steam. It spilled into the next day because the calibration process didn't kick off when the installers commissioned it, like Give Energy, like whatever signal they were sending didn't make it through. So it was the next afternoon when I called Give Energy and said, what's up? And then they triggered the whole process. So it started from about 3 p.m. and it went until about 3 a.m. or something like that. So that's why you see that we were pulling a little bit of power from the grid on the morning of the 28th here. After that, we've gone back to normal, so whatever we are producing, we're capturing and using, and again, you can see that the amount that we're pulling from the grid is tiny slivers here. So overall, July is a really good month. It's comparable to June. I think June just has the edge, even if you account for the fact that we have a bit of kind of dodgy data in our system due to installing the new battery. Our overall monthly percentage is 94%. I think the real number would be about 97 or 98 if we didn't have to pull from the grid. And then over on the right hand side you can see how much each of the panels are contributing to our system, to our performance, to our production for the month of July. So once again, the front of the house is doing most of the work, but the panels on the back are not far behind, and even that panel which has got shading for my neighbour's dormer is still producing 30 kilowatts in the space of a month. Alright, moving forward to talk about the best and the worst days. So the best day of the month was the 16th of July. We produced 39.9 kilowatts. So this isn't the best ever. We had 42 kilowatts in June, but it's still a really good day. You can see from the graph, the battery had run out the day before, so we were pulling power through the night from the grid. And then when the sun came up around 6 o'clock, it took over and we were kind of running free. You can see a few hours here in the afternoon where we had basically topped up the battery and then we were exporting loads of power to the grid. On this day we exported 6 kilowatts. The reason being is I think the car wasn't plugged in, so the excess wasn't going into the car, and I think from the day before I'd switched off the eddy to kind of get it to fill up the battery first, and so I hadn't turned it back on, so for a few hours until I noticed we were exporting to the grid. But once I got it all switched back on, you can see that we're capturing all of the power. So a really good day here. What I'm learning though is by having all these different brands in the system, they can't all talk to each other properly, and so sometimes I have to kind of manually keep checking on things around lunchtime to kind of get the car charger to override the eddy so that we maximize our consumption versus exporting. I haven't yet found a way to automate that. So that's why we ended up in this situation. Now our worst day, I've produced 2 graphs for you. So the worst day based on the data is actually the 27th of July, but this is the day we had the battery installed. So you can see from around 10:30 in the morning to about 4:30, the whole system was switched off. We weren't capturing any data at all whilst the installers worked and got everything hooked up. So we produced 7.4 kilowatts in the morning before the installers came along, and in the afternoon once they turned the whole system back on. But like I said, the real number would have been a bit more. It was a little bit of an overcast day, so I'm not expecting huge amounts of data, but I think we probably would have made another 7 kilowatts or so on this day if everything was running. If I exclude this day from the data, then the next worst day for the month of July is the 31st of July. We produced 14.3 kilowatts during the day. The battery was charged from the night before, so it lasted us the entire morning, and then in the evening we had enough charge in the battery to last us through until midnight. But you can see around 9 p.m. we have a tiny bit of pull from the grid, so this is because we were probably pulling more than 3 kilowatts at a moment, so the battery couldn't provide it all and we were getting a little bit out of the grid. Alright, I had a request asking for a bit more of a lifetime performance, particularly from the array. So what I've done is taken all the screenshots from each month for each panel and put it here on a page so you can see how each panel is contributing month by month. Just to help you compare to your own systems, I know I often refer to the front of my house pointing east and the back pointing west, But for clarity, what I've done is I've put the compass heading on the page for you here, because I'm not exactly east and exactly west. I'm a bit southeast and I'm a bit northwest. So the front of my house points at 126 degrees and the back of the house points at 306 degrees. So the front is always going to look better than the back, regardless of the shading that I've got. So hopefully this helps you. You can see that the back of the house in the months of November, December, January, the colour of the panels are kind of dark blue, black. It's basically saying the panels are not producing much. And this is because by the time the sun gets round to the back of the house to point at the panels, it's pretty much setting. The neighbour's dormer, is casting too big a shadow, and it hardly lets any power manage to get to the panels. But as the sun starts to get a higher track through the sky, it's over the top of the neighbour's dormer, and so it's managing to point at the panels and get them to produce some power. Alright, so this is the performance of the entire array. I hope you find this interesting and useful, and you can compare in your own systems to see how much your panels are producing if they're pointing at the same angle. As a reminder, my panels are 385 watt Trina panels. The chart on the bottom right hand side, the last one, this is the lifetime performance. So since the day I had the system installed in November, this is how much each panel has produced. So I've seen in other Enphase systems that if the panels are really producing a lot, then the colour of these panels on the diagram goes like a green kind of colour. So mine being all blue, what it's kind of telling me is I'm average. My panels on the back of the roof are slightly below average. If you have a south-facing array and you get an Enphase system, I would expect that all your panels kind of go green pretty quick, because it's able to capture the sun's power for most of the day. Alright, moving forward, so the traditional graphs here, if I talk about our household electricity consumption for the month of July, we have used 531 kilowatts in the house, which is heritage power we were consuming before we even got a solar array. We have pulled 53 kilowatts from the grid. We have put 186 kilowatts of green electricity from the solar panels into the eddy, and we've put 111 kilowatts of green energy from the solar panels into the car via the EV chargers. And then we've exported 66 kilowatts of power. This is basically when the car is full or it's not plugged in, the eddy has diverted as much as it can, the battery's full, and we have no other place that we can use up this power, so it goes to the grid. So across the month, 66 kilowatts was given back to the grid. So comparing July 22 to July 21, overall we consumed 479 kilowatts last July, and this year we've consumed 531 plus 53, so 584 kilowatts of power. So we're using 100 kilowatts more than we were last year. Once again, I can't really explain what is turned on in our house in addition to what we had last year. But at least the bulk of it is coming from green electricity, which is free. If I talk about the gas, so for the month of July, the central heating is switched off, so our gas consumption is pretty low, and we managed to put the 186 kilowatts into the eddy, so the orange segment is pretty sizable. What this is telling us is that 25% of all of our gas consumption for the month of July was green. It came from the eddy, so it was free. I would highlight that we're still using a lot of gas. We have gas cookers in the house, and we do a lot of cooking ourselves, so we're consuming gas. So we're never going to be able to get this down to zero unless we switch this out for an electric cooker, which we're not going to be doing anytime soon. If I move forward to show you the screenshot from the My Energy app, again, this is just showing you the power that's being diverted from the eddy into the two immersion heaters. And again, you should be able to make out that there's a grey coloured graph and there's a teal coloured graph. That represents the two different immersion heaters that we have. And then around the 27th, 28th of July, when the system was switched off, there's no surplus, and so that's why you don't see anything going on down here in those days. This is a really good chart now. So if I go back to talking about the installer's estimate versus reality. So first of all, if I talk about the left-hand side of the chart, what I'm measuring here is of all the power we produced, how much of it are we consuming? Now we want to consume as much of it as possible and not give anything back to the grid. Then we're being as efficient as we can with our entire system. So for the month of July, we were 94% efficient, or we consumed 94% of all of the electricity that we produced, and we only gave away 6%. Okay. Now the installer assumed that we would only be consuming half of what we produce, so we're blowing their metrics and their calculations out of the water. Now with the new battery installed, it was only plugged in for like a day and a half in the month of July, but during August I'm hoping what we'll see is that we close the gap, because we're able to capture more of the power that we're producing and send less back to the grid. I am expecting that the eddy is now diverting less, because I don't think we have that much power coming in the day to top up 2 batteries and also put enough to the eddy and put enough to the car. So I think we're going to see a shift there, but I am expecting to see this number close up a little bit. Looking to the right hand side then, so first of all let's talk about the green area and the green metric. So this is again what the installer expects. They expected us to consume half of what they project our array to consume in the first year. So they expected us to consume 2,458 kilowatts, and what we've actually done is consumed 4,036 kilowatts. So we're 164% past their estimate, which is really, really good. The significance of this, it means that the payback period is going to be much shorter than they expected. If I look at the blue portion here, this is where we track in relation to what the installer expects the entire system to produce across a 12-month period. So they're expecting us to produce 4,916 kilowatts, and so far the system has produced 4,334, and therefore we are 88% of the way there. So I anticipate we've got the month of August, which should be pretty good. Month of September, I'm expecting the power to reduce a bit, and the month of October, I'm expecting it to reduce a good chunk more. But in the next 3 months that we have before we've hit our 12 months, I am definitely expecting us to get well past the installer's production estimate. I reckon we'll get to something like 110, maybe even 115%. So again, this is really good because it further contributes to beating their payback period. As I said in an earlier video, they've given me 3 different metrics because I've got 3 different arrays on my roof, but the average of all of them is about 18 years payback period. That's their calculation. I don't think they take the battery into account at all. It's just based on the solar panels. And you can see by this graph, we are beating their expectations in terms of both consumption and my forecasted production. So I think that 18-year payback period is going to be reduced significantly. And when we get onto the payback curve, you'll see what the new latest numbers are. Thank you for all the likes and the comments and all the additional subscribers this month. It means a lot to me. It tells me that the energy I'm putting into making all these videos is helping somebody out there. If you haven't subscribed, I would really appreciate it if you would, especially if you're finding the content helpful. It's kind of feedback for me that I'm on the right track and I'm doing something worthwhile. Nobody's paying me to make these videos, so I'm just kind of doing it because I found that when I was researching how to get solar panels, there just wasn't any useful information to inform me of what's good and what's bad, particularly from people in the UK. There was lots of stuff from people in America and Australia, but they get a lot more sunshine than we do. So I was really interested to see if it's worth it in the UK. So that's the reason why I'm making these videos and producing all this information every month. So if you are finding it helpful, please do hit that subscribe button. So if we talk about peak power, we didn't hit any 5 kilowatt days according to Enphase, although looking at the Give Energy app, I did see on the 15th or 16th of July that we hit about 5.3, 5.4 kilowatts at a moment. So as I said, the Give Energy app is giving me 10-second intervals, and the Enphase app is taking more like 15-minute intervals. That's what the difference is there. But we were consistently above 4 kilowatts. We averaged 4.1, and we had days where we were about 4.5. You can see where we had the hottest day on record here in the UK. We hit 40 degrees, and on that particular day we were averaging about 4.1 kilowatts. So the purpose of me tracking the temperature on this chart was to try and see the correlation between the temperature and the power output. So on the hottest day, it wasn't our best day, but it wasn't significantly different. So I'm still not seeing the correlation, but I'll continue to track it. So on average, July wasn't producing as much power as the previous month. As I said, we had a couple of days where we had switched off the system because we're doing things to it, so it's pulled our average down a tiny bit. We probably could have matched the 4.2. I think this is the peak of my system. I don't think we're going to see any more. So there's an interesting comment on some of my videos at the moment about clipping. So one of our followers has got an in-phase system and they're suspecting that their system is clipping. I can't remember the details, but if they have a south-facing array, that may well be the case because your panels are capturing more radiation from the sun and you're probably getting to your system max. Because mine is east and west, I think I'm getting away with it, and that's why I'm capturing this chart. So overall, as a total system, my peak power is 4.1 kilowatts when my system could potentially be doing 7.3, but that doesn't mean that one or two individual panels aren't maxing out, and I'm experiencing clipping when the majority of them are not. So there's no way of me getting to this data via the reports and things Enphase provides. The only way to get that is if we can connect to the API and download the granular data. I know it exists because I've used Home Assistant and I can see real-time information coming out of each inverter. But as I've said in previous videos, I don't know how to write the API and get the data out. So I'm eagerly awaiting somebody else who figures this out, who's willing to share how to do it with me and maybe help me and just write the code for me, basically. All right, moving forward to talk about energy independence. So we averaged 94% for the month of July, and that's brought our lifetime average up to 71%. Okay. As I said, those two kind of days when the battery was installed and it was charging up has pulled down our metric. So I reckon we were at 95, 96, 97%. If you look at the graph, apart from those couple of days at the end of the July, we were solid with green bars up in the mid-90s. So this is really, really good. And as I said, my projection for the lifetime, of a year, is that we're probably going to average about 67, 68% energy independence, taking into account the autumn and the winter months where it's quite low. So I think that's still pretty good, and the additional battery now should help us push that number up by a few more percent. And finally, let's go on to talk about the payback curve. So starting at the top left, our CapEx, our capital expenditure, has gone up. It's because we installed the new battery and purchased the new battery this month. So our new grand total is £21,616. Now, I know many of you are going to switch off and fall off your chair that this is an extortionate amount of money and solar panels are not worth it. But just give me a moment. First of all, we have a really big house and we consume a lot of power. So I went into this knowing that I need to create a really big array. Second of all, our roofs face east and west. So we needed more panels to compensate for the fact that we're not pointing them all in the most optimal direction. If you have a south-facing roof, you'll need fewer panels to produce the same amount of power. Third, we have shading from a neighbour's dormer and trees. And so a traditional straightforward string inverter would have meant that I lost a load of power that the panels were producing because we're configured to the weakest link. So I paid extra to get the Enphase system so each panel works independently. And in my point of view, you've seen from those charts earlier on that it's paying off, because otherwise, although some of my panels on the back of my house managed to produce 45 watts across the month, 45 kilowatts across the month, the weakest panel in that string was producing 30, which meant that the additional 15 kilowatts every panel was doing would have otherwise been wasted. So for me, it's money well spent. It was needed in my system. In addition, to get all of this equipment installed, to manage all the cables and things, we had to open up floors and run some trunking underneath. do some kind of work on our driveway in preparation for the chargers. So we had to get rid of a chimney from the roof to make space for the solar panels. All of that was kind of additional cost which was specific to us, and potentially in your setup you might not need to spend that extra money, and so again the whole thing will cost you less. I can tell you straight off the bat that you could probably get all of the same stuff or the same capability and probably spend 25% less, get this done in about 15 grand if you wanted an array the same size as mine. Most people are quite satisfied with an array of 4 or 5 kilowatts, and you can get those installed for about £4,000 or £5,000, as long as you're not fussy on the brand and the installation is kind of straightforward in your house. If you then want a battery, or you could add on the cost of a battery. In my case, the 9.5 kilowatt battery was £3,600 installed, and I think I got a really good deal. It'll probably cost more than that for other people. So this is how it starts to add up. You can get a battery without solar panels, so that might be something to consider, because then you can charge it at the cheap Octopus Go rate overnight and be paying a quarter of the price for your electricity. Alright, so anyway, I've now spent 21,616. I don't plan on spending any more money on this system apart from keeping it running. We want to just kind of bed down and capture some of the savings now before we even consider doing anything more. I don't even know what the more would be, but let's see. So, lifetime from our solar panels, we have now saved £1,118 by having free electricity versus purchasing this from the grid. We have saved £355 worth of diesel by diverting power into our car versus buying diesel. We have saved £49 worth of gas by diverting surplus to heat our hot water. I've just received a bill from Octopus, and they have started paying me for the energy we export back to the grid. So they've paid me for 8 kilowatts, even though we exported 66 in the month of July. They've paid me for 8. So I think, our meters got working and the whole thing finally got activated just in the last week of July. And in that time frame, we only exported 8 kilowatts. So 8 times 4.1 pence is 34p. So like I've been saying, I'm not expecting mega numbers over here, but the money is now starting to trickle in. Okay, back in January, we had to charge the car from the grid when we first got it. So we put £9 of electricity into the car, so that's the cost. And the net then of all these numbers, these OPEX numbers, is £1,513 saved already by having this system. So that leaves us a balance of £20,102 to pay back the cost of installing all of this and breaking even. The £1,500 equates to 7% payback. We've now had the solar system installed for 8 months and 27 days, and based on a linear extrapolation with the new battery installed, we now forecast to pay back the system in 10 years and 4 months. Okay, if you're interested what these numbers would have been without the additional battery, payback would have been on 8.4%, and the forecasted payback would have been 8 years and 7 months. All right, so last month the payback forecast was 9 years and 11 months. So with this month's production on a like-for-like basis, we have lopped off a further 1 year and 4 months. But because we've put the battery on, we've then ended up adding on 6 months net. So you can see basically the month of July is still helping to pull down the overall average, but the new battery's only pushed it up by about 6 months. All right, if I go through all the numbers that you see here in the table, so starting at the top for July, we have produced 893 kilowatts from our solar panels. We pushed 66 kilowatts to the grid. We have therefore consumed in the house 827 kilowatts. According to Enphase, we purchased 54.7 kilowatts from the grid. According to Octopus, they've billed me for purchasing 53 kilowatts from the grid. In terms of our house consumption, so we put 186 kilowatts into the eddy. We put 111 kilowatts into the car, which means all the regular stuff in our house used up 531 kilowatts. So this is your fridge, freezer, TV, microwave, charging your phone, your laptop, whatever. Talking about gas, we have used 773 kilowatts of gas equivalent. I use the word equivalent because it means actual gas consumption plus the kilowatts that the eddy diverted. So the 186 kilowatts this month, which went into the eddy, if we had bought that as gas instead of using the eddy, then we would have been using a total of 773 gas kilowatts. So it's a confusing thing to understand, but that's why I wanted to point it out. And then, according to our supplier, we have imported from the grid 587 kilowatts of gas between the 2 meters that we've got. Moving on to the bottom portion, the monetary values then. So as I said, we spent just under £3,600 on the new battery, and that's including installation. I think the battery was 3,300 or something like that, 3,320, something like that, including VAT, and then we paid £250 for installation. I want to point out though, my original installer wanted £1,000 for installation. That's not including the battery, that's just labour. I went to a second approved Give Energy installer. They wanted to overcharge me on the battery by £1,000, and then they wanted to charge me another £600 for installation. When I kind of said to this installer that me as a retail customer, I can go and get the battery £1,000 cheaper than you, I would expect that with your kind of trade account, you should be able to get it a little bit cheaper than me. They didn't really have an answer, and they said, look, we don't offer an install-only service. We only do the work for you if we supply the battery. Basically, the answer there was he was trying to overcharge me on the battery to cream a bit more money out of me. So I said no to him. And in the end, what I had to do is I approached the electrician who installed my EV chargers. I asked them if they would do this for me, and they were willing to get trained up as approved Give Energy installers, which, by the way, is just going to a 1.5 hour Zoom call. And he said there was nothing in there which, is required an electrician. All they did is read out the instruction manual to them, and that was it. That's all it seems to take to become an approved Give Energy installer. Of course, you need to be an electrician in the first place to even get there. But it's not that difficult, apparently. So anyway, he charged me £250 to install it, which is roughly a day rate, and I thought that was fair. I was quite happy to pay a fair price to have this installed. I just wasn't happy being ripped off. All right, so that, as I said, our total capital expenditure is £21,616. Here are the unit rates for our gas and electricity. And then this month we have therefore saved £255 worth of electricity by getting free solar. We have saved £13.62 worth of gas by diverting energy into our eddy. Using our eddy into our hot water. We've saved £85 worth of diesel by using the electric car. And we have made 34 pence from Octopus by selling our 8 kilowatts back to them. So that means our total OPEX savings are £354, and our cumulative is £1,513, leaving a balance of £20,102 to hit payback. Overall payback is 7% or 8.4% if you discount the new battery, and the forecast then is 10 years and 4 months, or it was 8 years and 7 months without the battery. And our independence this month is 94%, and that includes the few days where the system was switched off, not doing its thing properly, so the number's been pulled down from what it would have otherwise been. The graph is the payback curve, or the graph is still there in the background. You can just about see the capital line here in the background. This great big leap up is the cost of the battery and the cost of the installation. And as I've been saying for a while, these lines down the bottom, which represent all of these different OPEX numbers, they're beginning to fan out. I've added an extra line in down here, which represents the 34p of SEG savings, but you're not going to see this line. It's going to sit there flatlining on zero for a long time, I think. All right, that's it for this month. I hope you found the video useful. Please comment, like, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.